Are we going backwards or what? Nope, just want to go forward. Alright, let's do this manually. This big white line down the road. Somebody took off with some leaking paint, I'm willing to bet. Sunday works.
Basically said that, well, he couldn't stand up to Donald Trump because if he did, clients who are pro-Trump would leave his firm and go to other firms that would basically make nice with the administration. People who have reported on big law on these firms, and I got my career start reporting on them at a website called Above the Law. I worked there for 10 years, 11 years reporting on these firms. Don't understand just how often these firms, I can't say collude, but let's say coordinate in ways that are not necessarily helpful to their clients when their money's on the line, right? They coordinate about associate salary, they can coordinate about partner benefits, they coordinate about billable rates for their attorneys, right? So there is a mass ability for these firms to hold the line and act together, even when those interests are sometimes against their clients, right? So they can do it. They're choosing not to do it. They're choosing to bend the knee and lick Donald Trump's boots right now, and it is pathetic and disgusting. There are some firms that are standing up. Perkins Coie, as you mentioned them, they're fighting the good fight. But the fact that they are big law brethren do not have their back is pathetic. But as you say, Jason, this is kind of how authoritarianism works. This is how dictatorships work. It doesn't have to happen to everybody. It just has to happen to a few people, to a small group of people, and it scares and it chills and it cowers everybody else.
I want to switch now to your book, and here's what's interesting about bad law, 10 laws that are sort of ruining America. I don't know if you have this experience, Ellie, but I've seen this a lot of times with scholars and academics. You write a book, you have a brilliant idea, and then the circumstances of the world change in such a way that how that book hits is a little different, right? I'm sure when you started writing bad law, it was like, we'll still have a semi-functional democracy and judiciary in place that might be able to learn something from what I'm writing about. But in our current environment, where judges are being intimidated, where law firms are being intimidated, where people are bending the knee, where the institutions that are supposed to protect us are folding like lawn chairs, I just want to say, I want to ask from a philosophical standpoint, what do you want people to take from this book in a time where it appears as though this country is moving towards lawlessness?
Yeah, well, look, Jason, I wrote this book in 2024 knowing full well what was waiting for us on the other end of that election, right? I wrote the book, I finished the first draft before Joe Biden's first debate. So I was under no illusions about what might happen in November. And my thought was, well, if Biden or eventually Harris was able to pull it out and win the election, then this book would be a good blueprint for what I want Democrats to do should they win power in 2024, right? If the other thing happens, and we are now living in the other thing happening, well, then this book becomes my first best attempt to start writing Project 2029, right? Because if you think about Project 2025, they didn't start writing that, after Biden's first debate, right? They started writing that in 2021 when they had no power. That's why Republicans, whenever they come into office, they come in with a hammer ready to smash.
Hi, I just have a pickup order for Russ.
Some tape
Thank you.
and some super glue and some ideas about how to put things back together and protect institutions. And I want people to smash, right? I got Mahone behind me, right? We could pick up a hammer and smash some of these things that the Republicans continually erect to frustrate progress, to frustrate fairness, to frustrate democracy and equality in this country. And so what I want people to take from the book is that there actually are things that we can do beyond saying orange man bad, right? There are things that we can do as a society and as a party to make our world better. And while that's not going to happen right now we are in survival mode. At some point, one hopes that we will come out of it. And when we come out of it, I at least want to be one of the guys with a plan for what to do with it if we ever are allowed to get power again.
I'll tell you, Ellie, if there's anybody out there who is noble enough to lift that hammer, it is you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening on The Last Word.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, man. Coming up, in the age of Trump, toxic masculinity is being seen by the political right as an asset, not a liability. And that's having a terrible effect on young men online. This is a topic I really care a lot about, and I'm excited to talk about it next when we come back from break.
Wow, looks like your hiring's making a lot of people happy.
ZipRecruiter's new tool, Zip Intro, is a game changer. It saved me so many...
Threat to whom exactly? While Donald Trump was not working to lower your prices, he was keeping convicted criminals out of prison. Trump announced he was pardoning 3 co-founders of a cryptocurrency exchange who were ordered to pay a $100 million fine. Sentiment has dropped at a 2-year low. As one Fox Business anchor put it, this is a tough way to end the week.
Woo, folks, this is a tough way to end the week if you're long the market. If you're long gold, you're happy, but Dow is losing about 724, the S&P down 113, the NASDAQ down 484. That will do it for us.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. So markets crash over 700 points today after a bad inflation report, more tariff confusion. Oh, and by the way, Republicans really going to raise taxes? That could have done it.
Into the second term of the Trump presidency, and Americans are not happy with the Trump economy. Not even Larry Kudlow, it seems. According to a new poll, 60% of Americans believe the economy is bad. And once again, Donald Trump's tariff threats are fueling that pessimism. This week, Donald Trump threatened a 25% tariff on imported vehicles. In response to Donald Trump's threat, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said this.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over. What is clear is that we, as Canadians, have agency. We have power. We are masters in our own home.
Masters in our own home. Maître chez nous in French. That's an old nationalist Canadian slogan that goes back to the 1960s. Our once polite neighbors to the north are now dusting off old nationalist slogans to stand up to Trump's trade war. Mark Carney said that ahead of his first call today with Donald Trump. Donald Trump called today's call, quote, an extremely productive call. We agree on many things, and we'll be meeting immediately after Canada's upcoming election to work on elements of politics, business, and all other factors that will end up being great for both the United States of America and Canada. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So, I just want to point out here, Trump's correctly calling Carney prime minister now, not governor, and no mention of Canada as the 51st state. While Donald Trump didn't mention Canada's intention to enforce retaliatory tariffs, Prime Minister Carney said in a statement that he, quote, informed the president that his government will implement retaliatory tariffs to protect Canadian workers and our economy following the announcement of additional U.S. trade actions on April 2nd, 2025. One Wall Street firm predicted that tariffs could make car prices go up by, get this, $10,000. The Wall Street Journal editorial board writes, quote, Mr. Trump justifies his car tariffs as a national security threat under Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act. As we wrote in 2019 when he tried this gambit the last time, he apparently fears the attack of the killer Toyotas. Canada and Mexico, those global menaces, account for about half of U.S. auto imports. U.S. allies in South Korea, Japan, and Europe account for almost all the rest. Imports give Americans more choices and at lower prices than they would otherwise have if all cars sold in the United States had to be made domestically. Americans, as a result, can afford more and better quality cars than they could just a few decades ago. This is a security threat to whom exactly? While Donald Trump was not working to lower your prices, he was keeping convicted criminals out of prison. Trump announced he was pardoning 3 co-founders of a cryptocurrency exchange who were ordered to pay a $100 million fine earlier this year because they, quote, willfully flouted U.S. anti-money laundering laws to boost revenue. He also pardoned Trevor Milton, a Trump donor who was convicted of defrauding investors. So since we're keeping track and score here, so crypto money launderers and a Trump donor comfortable with defrauding people, that's okay, got it. Trump also took no action to hold any of his top officials who breached national security by sharing military attack plans in a group chat on a commercial messaging app that accidentally included a journalist. As Hillary Clinton put it in the New York Times, quote, "It's not the hypocrisy that bothers me. It's the stupidity." We're all shocked that President Trump and his team don't actually care about protecting classified information or federal record retention laws. But we already knew that. What's much worse is that top Trump administration officials put our troops in jeopardy by sharing military plans on a commercial messaging app and unwittingly invited a journalist into the chat. That's dangerous, and it's just dumb. And I haven't even gotten to the damage Mr. Trump is doing by cozying up to dictators like Russia's Vladimir Putin, blowing up our alliances, force multipliers that extend our reach and share our burdens, and trashing our moral influence by undermining the rule of law at home, or how he's tanking our economy and blowing up our national debt. Trump and Republicans would absolutely prefer that everyone talk about the Vances being pariahs in Greenland than talk about what Elon Musk and Dodge are reportedly doing to Social Security, and potentially the 70 million Americans who receive Social Security. Wired reports, quote, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, Dodge, is starting to put together a team to migrate the Social Security Administration's computer systems entirely off one of its oldest programming languages in a matter of months, potentially putting the integrity of the system and the benefits on which tens of millions of Americans rely at risk.
Possibly go wrong?
Under any circumstances, a migration of this size and scale would be a massive undertaking, experts tell Wired, but the expected deadline runs the risk of obstructing payments. Of course, one of the big risks is not underpayment or overpayment per se. It's also not paying someone at all and not knowing about it. The invisible errors and omissions, an SSA technologist tells Wired. Joining us now is senior politics editor at Wired, Leah Feiger. Leah, thank you so much for starting us off on the show today. I just want to say this because there are so many different terrible things that Elon Musk has attempted to do to our government. But I'm thinking of this transfer of technology for the Social Security Administration. Look, I'm worried about going to Best Buy and getting something transferred from my laptop to my iPad, right? That can take all day. We're talking about millions of people of all ages all over the country. How long should a process like this take if it were done carefully and effectively and efficiently?
Doing all right. How you doing?
Jason, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Look, the Social Security Administration has actually looked into moving its systems off of COBOL for years now. It's an archaic coding system from the 1950s, and they looked into moving it onto something more modern like Java. But during this, they predicted that a migration would take 5 years to safely happen. And Dodge's team wants to do it in months.
So that sounds crazy. I mean, just to be perfectly clear. But here's the other problem, and I'm curious, based on your writing and your reporting, how do they plan to do that? Because usually, if you're going to do something faster than the estimated timeline, it's because you're going to put more people on the job, right? If it takes 3 years with 1,000 people working 24 hours a day, I'll put 3,000 people, and then maybe we can take 1 year. How is Dodge planning on doing this so much faster? How are they taking a 5-year job and turning it into a 4-month job? Because it doesn't seem like they're hiring new people. If anything, they're cutting people out of the government.
Right. Well, sources told Wired reporter McKenna Kelly that in order to migrate all of this code into the more modern language within a few months, they'd likely need to employ some form of artificial intelligence to help translate the millions and millions lines of code. This is an undertaking that could really break just so many things. Even minor changes could result in massive failures across programs, delaying payments, miscalculating payments, and losing beneficiary data entirely and across the way. It's a really, really dangerous thing that could be coming soon.
And Leah, I want to just close with this because this is also something that concerns me. How much can we trust who's responsible for this transfer, because a lot of these people who seem to be working for Elon Musk, they're under his supervision, but they're not really being held accountable by Congress. We don't know who's doing this. We don't know if there could be leaks of this information. This is very private, intimate information about millions of Americans that could be sold to anybody. How do we know who's actually going to do this job, and are they accountable to anybody other than Musk?
That's a great question, and while it's not clear to us exactly when this project would begin, sources are anticipating it happening soon, and Steve Davis, a senior Doge leader and one of Elon Musk's key lieutenants who's been with him at a number of his other companies, is organizing this effort. And Wired reporting last week actually showed that there were so many more Doge people at SSA than anyone had previously thought, and possibly among the largest Doge units deployed to any government agency. And we're talking about names that have popped up time and time again. Akash Boba, Scott Coulter, Marco Ellis, Luke Ferreter. These are familiar names if you've been following all of this. And again, really key to this, they don't have experience in these massive government systems. They don't have government experience. So in terms of who they are loyal to, that's a really difficult question that I don't feel comfortable getting into. But we know that they have largely worked with Musk organizations in the past. They were brought in by Musk lieutenants, and they're the ones with the keys to the kingdom right now.
In other words, Leah Feiger, we don't know if we can trust him at all. Thank you so much for starting us off with that sobering news tonight. Great reporting.
Thank you.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He serves on the House Oversight Subcommittee on Government Efficiency. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to start with this. It's the sort of final question that I had for Leah. What's the oversight here, right? I mean, Social Security information is incredibly important. It's not just Social Security numbers. It's who gets paid. It's how much they get paid. It's where they live. Who is watching the watchmen here? And is there anything that Congress can do to provide oversight while this process is happening?
Yeah, well, thanks. Look, I literally right now just walked off the stage of a huge town hall that we have here back in my home district. I'm actually here backstage of this town hall, and this exact question we actually just discussed. What people want, first and foremost, is for Congress to fight like hell and to match the energy of the people on the ground. We know that right now we're actually winning some of these cases in the courts, but half the cases that we have filed in a variety of programs and a variety of different courts, we actually have won. People pushing back is also working. People are beginning now to activate, to organize, to push back in new ways, to call members of Congress, to call their leaders. That is also beginning to work. And in Congress, when we don't have the majority, there are certainly people that are pushing back and fighting hard. They're demanding answers. They're pushing back on unpopular policies. And in many of these cases, the White House is now actually retracting some of what they're doing. I mean, think about when they have tried in the past to, for example, cut some of the aid that we've been sending out to nonprofits. As it relates to Social Security, there's no mistake. They're trying to damage Social Security as we speak. But we are going to the courts. We are launching our own investigations, even if we don't have the majority. And we're speaking out, trying to get Republicans to also do the right thing. We only need 3 Republicans to join us to actually stop some of these cuts.
Congressman, one of the things that we hear a lot here at the network, the polling, is that the American people are frustrated, right? And they want the Democratic Party to be an opposition party, not just the party out of power, but opposition. But also, people want to hear a plan. So when I hear you say that you're pushing back and you're fighting in the courts, legislatively, is there anything that the Democrats can do right now? Is there any bill that's important to Republicans that Democrats can refuse to support in order to have some leverage in these negotiations? Because as much as people may want to march in the streets, and as much as they want to sue in the courts, many Americans still feel like not enough is being done as their rights, their benefits, and their freedoms are being snatched in front of them every day.
Well, look, I think 2 things. One is, one of the reasons why many of us Democrats are pissed, especially in the House, is that we actually just had a huge opportunity in front of us just last week with this budget proposal that unfortunately the Senate could not stop. And so that was incredibly disappointing. We lost a lot of leverage that we should never have lost as Democrats and as a Congress. Moving forward, what we have in front of us right now is a massive bill that we know is going to come forward from Donald Trump that's going to have his tax plan, a tax on Medicare, a tax on Social Security, a border plan, all going to be in basically one massive bill. So absolutely, right now, Democrats are working with also some Republicans, trying to see if we can get some Republicans to oppose some of these cuts. And we're also trying to make noise to actually pressure these Republicans. Because look, on the votes, we don't have the votes. We're in the minority. We're 3 away. So we need to encourage Republicans to do the right thing. So what are we doing? Tomorrow, I'm going to be in Congresswoman Young Kim's district, who's a Republican, who's refusing to host a town hall. I'll be hosting a town hall in her district. We're having tons of her constituents coming out. We're encouraging them to mobilize against her. She's in a swing district, and people need to know in her community that people are going to lose their Medicare. People are going to lose and can't afford to not have a Social Security check. We've got to encourage people like Congresswoman Young Kim, like Congressman Ken Calvert here in California, to do the right thing. If you call yourself a moderate, but you're not willing to actually vote with us to save Social Security, then you should be defeated and you should be held accountable. So that's what we're working on right now, is trying to bring some of the Republicans across the aisle and also win some of these special elections coming in. One of the seats in Florida is actually looking pretty promising right now.
Congressman Garcia, thank you so much. You have the kind of energy and passion that should be in leadership. Just going to say that right now. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Coming up today, Elon Musk's election law breaking was stopped by Wisconsin's Attorney General as federal courts blocked Trump and Musk's chainsaw on America multiple times on multiple issues today. That's next when we're back.
Wow. Incredible. Amazing. My go-to is Lumify eye drops.
Lumify dramatically reduces redness.
In 1 minute.
And look at the difference.
My eyes are
Force it to
brighter
go.
and whiter.
For up to 8 hours.
Lumify is kind of amazing.
See for yourself. We're still going for that sweet shot.
And with higher stroke risk from AFib, not called.
About bad law, 10 laws that are sort of ruined.
Erect to frustrate.
God help Danos grow from a one-man.
She's the author of the book, Generation Z, Their Voices, Their Lives. Chloe, thank you so much for joining me this week. I was so impressed with the article that you wrote. I watched adolescence, as millions of people across the country have done here and in the UK. I'll just start with this. After you watched the series, what compelled you to want to watch it with young people? I know a lot of people who are parents watched it and were terrified. They wanted to go into their kids' phones or sit down and have a conversation. What made you think, I need to get 100 young people together and sort of have a group discussion of this experience?
So two things. Number one, obviously lots of the responses and reactions to adolescents were coming from adults who, you know, all their good intentions don't live in those teenage worlds, which is precisely, I think, what the show highlighted, how much there's kind of a chasm between adults and sort of Gen A and Gen Z. But the second one was, and lots of my work revolves around working with and researching young people. I've interviewed thousands of young people for books and podcasts, is quite often we have a tendency to really focus on the very worst of young people and sort of really exacerbate the bad stuff. And what quite often gets ignored, and I think this particularly might be true with young men, is there's lots of really good kids as well with good ideas. And quite often, in our hurry to really understand what's going wrong, we don't want to understand or think about what's going right. And I think it's really important. So I did this screening and I was really interested in the response of all young people, but I think I probably included more responses of young men, which were really interesting. And I think they're not just their kind of ideas, but their solutions. And the solutions they were passing on to like younger brothers and younger people in their communities.
Well, that's an interesting way to pull into the driveway.
I think resonated with people.
Yeah, one of the things that I was fascinated by is you said, you know, when you talk to these young people, the happiest young men were the ones who had a community outside of online space. They're the ones who had a football team. They're the ones who may have been active in their churches. They're the ones who had good relationships with older brothers and sisters and things like that. And that was sort of an optimistic sort of takeaway.
Yeah, I would say that was a good drive.
And you see this show where you feel like your
definitely enough on the parking job.
Influenced by these sort of online
ability to pull into the house consistently.
Should you sign them up in clubs?
Like,
should you just talk to them? What are some of the things that young people said about that?
Why?
Yeah, so three things really. I do think the loss and the sort of cessation of real life communities has essentially been one of the sort of missed and greatest tragedies globally, because I think when you're in the real life and in real life communities, you have that kind of inspiration and humanity that you get from real life experiences that I think are absent from online ones, which are young people of each other's humanity, and it doesn't promote that sort of division that online communities do.